come here believing that you are chosen by others, that love or betrayal is the result of another's will. But I tell you this, the patterns that bind you are not accidents. They are resonances, like a secret music vibrating in the depths of your soul. Narcissists do not choose you in the way you think. They do not stand above you, selecting you like a sovereign choosing a subject. They sense something older, something unspoken, something that you yourself may have long forgotten but is etched into the very fibers of your being, a wound. And the wound is not shameful, though you have carried it like a hidden curse. The wound is your initiation, your proof that you have lived, that the unconscious has marked you with the fire of its strange alchemy. I have spent my life studying the shadow, the hidden side of our being, and I have found that we are always drawn to what we cannot see in ourselves. We are drawn to our pain, our unlived life, our own darkness, disguised as another person. The narcissist is not merely a person who loves themselves excessively, but a figure born out of their own broken mirror. They look into you and see a reflection they can feed upon, because your wound gives them entry. It is as if they have an instinct for finding where you bleed, not out of cruelty alone, but out of their own desperate hunger. They too are trapped, feeding on the life of others, because they have never faced their own wound. But perhaps you have felt it, that sense of being seen and yet not seen, of being both desired and diminished in the same breath. Why do you feel so magnetically pulled towards the one who hurts you? It is not because you are weak, but because somewhere deep within, your unconscious is trying to resolve something. It is as if your soul whispers, here is the place of your unfinished story. Here is the place where your shadow lives. The narcissist is often the archetype of the devourer, the one who consumes light to fill their inner void, and your wound calls to them because it is radiant, it glows in the dark places where unhealed love waits like a forgotten child. When I speak of wounds, I do not mean only the scars of childhood, though they are often the deepest. I mean the wound of existence itself, the fundamental tension of being alive and separate, of longing for union and yet fearing it. You might remember moments from your earliest years when love was conditional, when you learned to silence parts of yourself to be accepted, to be safe. The narcissist does not create this silence, they only dance with it, pulling you back into the labyrinth of your own psyche where the minotaur of shame and fear lurks. And if you are brave enough to walk that labyrinth with open eyes, you will discover that the true danger was never the narcissist. It was your own belief that you are unworthy of being loved without condition. There is something mystical about the way we encounter certain people. It is as if fate arranges meetings not to bless or punish us, but to awaken what has been asleep. Have you ever had a dream where a figure appears, both seductive and terrifying? A figure who promises both ecstasy and ruin. That figure is often an image of your own shadow, clothed in the garments of another person. The narcissist, in the language of dreams, is often the trickster or the sorcerer, the one who blinds you with a mirror. They say, look how valuable you are when I see you. But the moment you seek that reflection, They withdraw, and you are left chasing a ghost of yourself. This is not about blame. Do not blame yourself for being drawn to such a figure. There is no fault in your desire to be seen. But understand that your task is not to be chosen by them. It is to choose yourself until you see your own wound and tend to it like a sacred garden. You will remain susceptible to those who sense it. They are like wolves who smell the blood of unhealed pain. But you are not meant to fear the wolves. You are meant to confront the source of the bleeding. Imagine for a moment that your wound is not a flaw, but an archetype, a doorway to your deeper self. When I worked with patients who encountered destructive relationships, I always asked them to close their eyes and visualize the wound as a figure. What does your pain look like? I would ask. Some saw a child abandoned in the forest. Some saw a broken mask or a house on fire. Others saw nothing but darkness. I tell you now, go inward and see, because until you know the shape of your wound, you will mistake the narcissist's gaze for love when it is only a recognition of what is unresolved within you. The unconscious is not a passive realm. It is alive, and it draws to you what you have not yet made conscious. That is why certain patterns repeat in your life. Have you noticed it? The same type of person, of the same cycle of hope and disappointment. The same voice that tells you, if only I give a little more, maybe I will finally be seen. That is not the voice of your soul. It is the echo of your wound. And as long as you obey that echo, you will remain entangled in illusions. There is a moment in every journey when you must turn and face the shadow. It is not an easy moment. It feels like death because you are asked to let go of who you believed you were. The narcissist, in a strange and paradoxical way, becomes the teacher of this death. They push you to the point where you must either awaken or lose yourself completely. And if you awaken, you will see that the wound they sensed in you was never a sign of weakness. It was the birthplace of your strength. For only by knowing the wound can you find the medicine hidden in it. I remember once speaking about the myth of Chiron, the wounded healer. Chiron's wound never healed. But from that wound came his power to heal others. You too carry something of Chiron within you. The narcissist is not your healer. They are the catalyst, the one who shows you where your inner healer is sleeping. They sense your wound because it is the very place where your light is hidden. And if you dare to look deeply, to enter the pain instead of running from it, you will discover that your wound is also your gift. You see, the unconscious communicates in symbols, not words. It speaks in dreams, in certain emotions, in strange synchronicities that feel as though the universe itself is conspiring to show you something. When you meet someone who awakens both longing and fear, you are not simply meeting another person, you are meeting a living mirror of your own psyche. The narcissist, in this sense, is less a villain and more an archetypal figure who holds up a distorted reflection. They show you how you seek validation outside yourself, how you confuse recognition with love, and how easily you can be seduced by the promise of being seen. But do not forget that their power over you exists only because you have yet to fully see yourself. I often say that what we repress does not disappear, it becomes fate. The wound you have avoided becomes the magnet that pulls certain people into your life again and again until you finally turn inward. Think of it like a dream where you are being chased. The pursuer is terrifying until you stop running and face it. And in that moment, the dream changes. The narcissist's presence in your life is like that dream pursuer, a signal that something inside you longs to be faced. It is not about fixing them or earning their approval. It is about turning the gaze inward and asking, what in me has been longing for recognition? What in me still believes I must prove my worth? We all carry archetypes within us: the child, the victim, the hero, or the sage. These are not just abstract ideas, but living forces of the psyche. When you encounter a narcissist, often it is your inner child who is stirred, the one who still waits for someone to come and say, you are enough just as you are. But the painful truth is that no one can give you that gift except yourself. The narcissist senses this longing and steps into the role of the rescuer at first, dazzling you with attention, only to later become the judge who withholds approval. They are playing out their own inner drama, often unconsciously, but they also awaken yours. And in this meeting of wounds, there is an opportunity for profound transformation if you dare to take it. Let us speak of shadow, for without understanding shadow, you cannot truly see the dynamic at work here. The shadow is everything you refuse to see in yourself: your repressed anger, your denied power, your unacknowledged desires. It is not evil, it is simply hidden. And when you refuse to see it, you project it onto others. The narcissist often becomes the carrier of your shadow. They seem powerful, charismatic, untouchable, and yet beneath their facade, they too are desperately fragile. They mirror back to you your own fear of being invisible, your own craving for significance. It is a cruel dance at times, but also a sacred one, because through the mirror of shadow, you are invited to reclaim what you have lost. I want you to imagine, for a moment, standing in a vast hall of mirrors. Each mirror shows a different version of you, some radiant, some broken, some crying out for help. The narcissist steps into that hall and points to the most wounded reflection, saying, this is who you are, unless I see you. And in that moment, you forget that the hall contains many mirrors. You fixate on the one they choose, but I tell you, you are more than that single reflection. You are the whole. And until you see that, you will be at the mercy of anyone who claims the power to define your worth. The journey of individuation, the path I have dedicated my life to exploring, is about becoming whole, about embracing every part of yourself, including the wound. It is about realizing that no external figure, no narcissist or lover or authority, I can tell you who you truly are. Only the self, that deep center of your being, can do that. And the self often speaks through paradox. It allows people into your life who challenge you, who hurt you, not because you deserve pain, but because the wound is where the light enters. The narcissist senses your wound, yes, but they also unintentionally reveal the exact place where you need to reclaim your power. Have you noticed how relationships with narcissists often feel like a dream? The beginning is intoxicating, as if you have been found at last. You are seen, celebrated, adored. It feels like the sun has risen just for you. But soon, the clouds gather, criticisme replace praise, silence replaces warmth. You find yourself working harder and harder to win back the glow of the first days. This is not love. It is a reenactment of an older pattern. It is your psyche saying, here, look here. This is where you still seek love as a reward rather than as a birthright. When you understand this, the spell begins to break. There is a dream I once heard from a patient, a woman who had lived through years of such entanglement. She dreamt she was walking through a desert, carrying a jar of water. A man approached, begging for a drink, but each time she offered the jar, he smashed it and demanded more. She woke up in tears, realizing that the jar was her heart, and she had been giving it away to someone who could never be satisfied. This is the nature of the narcissistic dynamic. It is not your fault, but it is your task to learn when to stop handing over your life force. The narcissist's hunger is insatiable because it is not really about you. It is about the hole in their own soul, a hole they cannot bear to face. But your wound is not a hole. It is a doorway. When you stop seeing it as shameful and start seeing it as sacred, everything changes. You no longer attract those who want to exploit it. Instead, you begin to radiate a different kind of energy, one that says, I know who I am. Even in my brokenness, I need no one to complete me. And those who once sensed your vulnerability as a source of control will find they have no power over you. This is why self-awareness is the greatest act of liberation. To know your shadow is to take back what you have projected onto others. To know your wound is to transform it from a magnet for pain into a source of wisdom. I have often told my students and patients the task is not to destroy the shadow, but to integrate it, to bring it into the light where it can no longer rule you from the dark. The narcissist then becomes less of an enemy and more of a strange, unwilling guide. They push you towards the very threshold. You might otherwise have avoided the threshold of your own inner truth. And so I ask you, what is your wound? Not in the superficial sense, not merely the story of who hurt you, but the deeper truth beneath that story. Is it the fear of abandonment, the belief that you are not enough, the shame of being too much, too sensitive, too alive? These are not flaws. They are the places where the self whispers, calling you back. If you can sit with your wound, hold it like a child, and listen to its voice, you will begin to see that the narcissist's presence was never the real problem. The real problem was the way you abandoned yourself long before they did. There is a moment, often quiet and unexpected, when you realize that the person who seemed to hold such power over you is nothing more than a mirror. They are not the source of your worth, nor the keeper of your fate. They are a fragment of a dream you have been living. a dream shaped by old beliefs, old wounds, and old shadows. When that realization comes, it feels as though the spell begins to dissolve. You look into their eyes and no longer see a god or a demon, but a human being broken in their own way. You begin to see how much of the pain you felt was the echo of your own voice, calling out to be heard. Narcissists sense your wound because they are, in their own strange way, deeply attuned to the fractures of the human heart. They seek out those fractures, not because they wish to heal them, but because they instinctively know that where there is a wound, there is also light to be consumed. They are drawn to the places where you still believe you must earn love. But I tell you, love is not earned. Love is not a transaction. Love is the recognition of the self, the deep, unchanging essence of who you are. And until you recognize it within yourself, you will keep seeking it in those who cannot give it. The unconscious often brings such figures into our lives when we are ready to see something we have long avoided. It is not always easy to understand this. You might ask, why would my own psyche bring someone who hurts me? But the psyche is not concerned with comfort. It is concerned with wholeness. It will send you into storms if that is what it takes to awaken you. Just as the hero in a myth must face dragons to discover their true strength, you too must face the devouring forces of your own inner world. The narcissist becomes that dragon, fierce and merciless, until you realize that the real battle is not with them, but with the part of yourself that believes you are powerless. Consider the myths of Persephone and Hades. Persephone is taken into the underworld, not because she is weak, but because the descent is part of her initiation. She must face the dark and claim her own power before she can rise again. When you find yourself in a relationship that drains you, that forces you to confront your deepest fears of being unloved or unseen, you are undergoing your own descent. It is a painful journey, but also a sacred one, because when you emerge, you are no longer the same. You have tasted the darkness, and you have found your own light. Dreams often show us this process long before we are conscious of it. I have seen dreams where people are chased by shadowy figures, or trapped in endless hallways, or searching for a voice that calls to them from behind closed doors. These dreams are the language of the soul. They are telling you there is something within you that wants to be reclaimed. The narcissist, in waking life, becomes a symbol of that pursuit. They push you to the edge of yourself, to the place where you must decide whether to remain asleep or to awaken. When I worked with those who had endured such relationships, I never asked them to focus on the narcissist. I asked them to focus on themselves. Who were they before they were entangled in that web? What dreams had they silenced? What emotions had they buried to keep the peace? Often I would see a light flicker in their eyes when they began to remember, because beneath the pain there is always a deeper truth. You are not broken. You are not unworthy. You are simply waiting to return to yourself. There is an archetype I call the wounded child. This is the part of you that longs for love, that feels abandoned or unseen. It is innocent but vulnerable. When you encounter someone who promises to fill that void, the wounded child awakens. and clings to them, believing they are the answer. But this is an illusion. No one outside you can heal the child within. Only you can do that. When you learn to hold that inner child with tenderness, to listen to its cries and soothe its fears, you become less susceptible to those who seek to exploit your need. You might wonder, how do I heal such a wound? The answer is both simple and difficult. You must look inward. You must dare to sit in silence with yourself, to feel what you have avoided feeling. The wound may show itself as grief, as anger, as loneliness. But do not turn away. These emotions are not your enemies. They are your teachers. They show you where your love for yourself has been withheld. And when you can look into that wound and say, I see you and I will not abandon you, something shifts. You begin to radiate a strength that cannot be shaken by the fickle approval of others. The narcissist senses this shift too. When you no longer bleed self-doubt, they have nothing to feed on. Their power over you fades like mist under the morning sun. You see them for who they are, not as monsters, but as wounded beings themselves, trapped in their own illusions of superiority and fear. And while you may still feel compassion for them, you no longer feel bound to their games. You step out of the cycle, not because they have changed, but because you have, think of the alchemical process, the transformation of base metals into gold. The wound is the lead, heavy and dark, and the work of self-awareness is the fire that burns away the dross. In time, what remains is not the wound, but the wisdom it has given you. This is why I say that your wound is sacred. It is the crucible of your transformation. Without it, you would not know the depths of your own soul. Without it, you would not discover the strength that lies in the shadows. I invite you now to reflect on the times in your life when pain became a teacher. Perhaps it was a heartbreak, a betrayal, a moment when everything seemed to collapse. And yet, looking back, can you not see that these moments also held a strange gift? They forced you to let go of illusions, to dig deeper, to find a resilience you did not know you had. The encounter with a narcissist is no different. It is not an accident. It is an initiation. But the key is to step out of the story of victimhood and into the story of awakening. The journey does not end when you recognize the wound. That is only the beginning. Recognition is the first light that pierces the fog. But integration is the true work. You cannot simply name your pain and expect it to vanish. You must sit with it, converse with it, and understand its language. Each wound carries a story of love lost, of trust broken, of moments when you felt unseen or unheard. The narcissist senses these unspoken stories because they resonate on a frequency of unmet needs. And yet, the power they hold is not in the wound itself, but in your fear of facing it. Do you remember the first time you felt invisible? The first time you believed you were not enough? Perhaps it was in childhood, when a parent's gaze turned cold, or when you were told to be quiet, to stop being too much. These early moments sink deep into the psyche, forming the seeds of the shadow. You learn to hide parts of yourself, to smile when you wanted to cry, to please others while silencing your own voice. The narcissist does not create this wound, they awaken it, sometimes violently, by mirroring the same patterns of invalidation you once endured. But what if I told you that the wound, when faced with courage, becomes the portal to freedom? When you stop hiding from it, you begin to reclaim the fragments of yourself you left behind. The parts of you that were silenced, the angry child, the tender dreamer, the fierce protector, these are not your enemies. They are pieces of your wholeness waiting to be welcomed home. The narcissist cannot give you this wholeness. They can only remind you, often through pain, that you have been living without it. I have seen people transform when they finally turn inward. A woman once came to me, devastated by the end of a relationship with a man who drained her spirit. She said, "Why do I keep attracting people who hurt me?" I told her, "You are not attracting them as much as you are being called to see the places where you hurt yourself by believing you are unworthy of more." At first, she resisted this. It seemed cruel to suggest that her suffering was her own invitation. But over time, as she began to listen to her dreams and to write letters to the inner child she had long ignored, she saw the truth. Her wound was not a sign of failure. It was her soul's way of saying, "There is more to you than this pain." Dreams often reveal the hidden truths we cannot yet see in the daylight. I remember one dream she shared. She was standing in front of a cracked mirror. Each time she tried to touch the reflection, it splintered further, but then, in the dream, she picked up the shards and held them to her chest. Instead of cutting her, they began to glow. This is the essence of healing. When you accept the broken pieces, they become light. The narcissist cannot do this for you. They may even try to convince you that your brokenness is who you are. But when you hold those pieces yourself, you realize they were never meant to define you. They were meant to guide you back to your own strength. The archetype of the narcissist is not new. It appears throughout myths and stories as the figure who feeds on adoration, who withers when they cannot see their reflection. But what these stories often fail to tell is that the one who falls under the narcissist's spell is just as powerful, if only they realize it. The myth of Narcissus himself shows this. He fell in love with his reflection because he could not see the world beyond himself. But you are not meant to gaze forever into another's mirror. You are meant to break free and look into the vastness of your own soul. You may ask, how do I reclaim this power? The answer lies not in fighting the narcissist, not in trying to make them see or change, but in turning all that energy back to yourself. When you stop chasing their validation, you begin to hear the quiet voice of the self, the inner guide that has been waiting all along. This voice is not loud or demanding. It is patient and steady. It tells you the truth, even when it hurts. You do not need to be chosen. You are already whole. I speak often of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. This is not an easy path. It requires that you face your shadows, that you bring the unconscious into the light. Relationships, especially with difficult or destructive individuals, are some of the greatest teachers of this process. They force you to see where you are still fragmented, where you still give away your power. The narcissist, though unknowing, plays the role of the shadow bringer. They hold up a mirror, however distorted, and say, here is what you cannot see. Your task is not to fight them, but to take the mirror and look into it with your own eyes, to ask, what is this showing me about myself? There is a certain liberation that comes when you no longer fear your own darkness. When you can look at your wound and say, yes, I was hurt, but I am not defined by this hurt. You begin to step into a new reality. You no longer need the approval of those who withhold it. You no longer seek love in places where it cannot grow. You become the source of your own validation. This does not mean you close your heart or become cold. On the contrary, it means your love becomes purée, frère, no longer entangled with the desperate need to be seen by someone who cannot see themselves. Imagine a forest deep and dark. For years, you have avoided entering it because you feared what lived inside. The narcissist pushes you into this forest, and at first, you stumble and panic, but as your eyes adjust to the shadows, you realize the forest is not empty, it is alive with secrets, with forgotten parts of your soul. You begin to see the beauty in what you once feared, and when you emerge from that forest, you are no longer the same. You carry its wisdom, its strength, its wildness. This is what it means to integrate a wound. Do not misunderstand me. Healing is not a single moment of revelation. It is a process. You will still feel echoes of the old patterns. You will still be tempted by the pull of those who remind you of past wounds. But each time you choose yourself, each time you say, I will not abandon who I am for the sake of being seen, you grow stronger. And the more you grow, the less those old dynamics have any hold on you. In the end, you may even come to see the narcissist with compassion, not to excuse their actions, but to recognize that they too are trapped in their own pain. They are often the product of wounds they have never faced. Living in a hall of mirrors, they do not know how to escape. But their journey is not yours to fix. Your task is to walk your own path, to tend your own wound, to become whole in the way only you can. There is something profoundly liberating when you finally step outside the cycle of seeking and losing, of giving and being drained, of chasing someone who was never capable of meeting you where you truly are. It is as if the fog lifts, and for the first time, you see yourself clearly, not as a reflection in someone else's eyes, but as the living presence you always were. This clarity does not come from them, nor from any apology or recognition they might offer, but from the moment you turn inward and realize that what you sought in them was only ever a reminder of what you had forgotten within yourself. The narcissist senses your wound because wounds have a strange luminosity. They shine in the psyche like open gateways. But here is the truth. Once you begin to heal, that luminosity changes. It is no longer a beacon for those who would exploit it. It becomes a radiance that cannot be taken. It becomes the light of self-awareness And those who thrive on manipulation cannot endure its presence. When you fully inhabit your own power, the dynamics that once ensnared you simply fall apart. Consider how many of our myths and stories are about descent and return. Orpheus goes into the underworld for Eurydice. Inanna descends to the underworld to be stripped of her power before she can ascend as queen. Christ spends 3 days in the tomb before the resurrection. These myths are not just stories of gods or heroes, they are maps of the human soul. When you face the narcissist, when you confront the place in you that longs for someone else to define your worth, you are in your own underworld. It feels like death, but every death is a doorway, every ending is a passage to a deeper truth. The healing of the wound is not about erasing it. In fact, it is often the very scar that gives you wisdom. I have said before, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is because pain is the fire that burns away illusion. The narcissist's presence in your life is not a curse, but a mirror that forces you to see where you have given away your inner fire. And when you reclaim it, when you gather back the pieces of yourself, you become unshakable. You no longer look to others to complete you, because you have become whole within. I ask you now to consider the archetypes at play in your own life. Who is the child within you? Who is the protector? Who is the shadow waiting to be acknowledged? These inner figures are not abstractions. They are living forces that shape your relationships. The narcissist often awakens the victim archetype, but also the warrior if you allow it. The pain you feel is the call to arms, the summons to step into your own authority. You do not fight them directly. You fight the false beliefs they trigger. You challenge the inner voice that says, I am not enough unless they see me. And when you silence that voice by embracing your true self, you emerge as the sovereign of your own life. The self, the deep center of your being, is not wounded. It is eternal and untouchable. What gets wounded is the personality, the mask, the ego that tries to navigate the world. But the ego is not meant to be the master. It is meant to be the servant of the self. When you reconnect to that deeper source, you no longer live from the fragile place that fears rejection or craves constant validation. You live from a wellspring that does not run dry. And from this place, you can love freely, without being entangled in the toxic dynamics that once held you captive. I have often told those who struggle with these patterns, your task is not to find someone who will never hurt you. That is impossible, for all humans carry shadows. Your task is to become so grounded in who you are that no one's shadow can pull you into their storm. When you know your worth, when you honor your wound as a source of wisdom rather than shame, you begin to attract relationships built on truth, not illusion. You begin to see that love is not about being chosen, but about choosing to be whole, to be authentic, to be free. There is a dream, I remember, one that feels almost universal. A man once told me he dreamt of standing in a field at night. In the distance, a figure called to him, promising warmth and light. He walked toward it, but the closer he came, the colder it felt. Finally, he stopped and looked down at his own hands. In them, he saw a small flame He realized that he had been carrying the light all along. When he awoke, he said, "I understand now. I was always searching for what was already inside me." This is the essence of the journey you are on. The narcissist is a distant figure promising what they cannot give. But your true task is to see the flame you carry. As you integrate these truths, your relationship with your wound changes. It no longer feels like a source of shame, but like a sacred teacher. You begin to see how it has shaped you, how it has given you depth and empathy, how it has forced you to explore the hidden dimensions of your soul. You realize that without this journey, you might never have discovered who you truly are. The narcissist may have sensed your wound, but they cannot take away the wisdom that comes from healing it. And so I leave you with this. Do not despise your wound. Do not curse the people who have awakened it. See them for what they are, catalysts, mirrors, shadows, and then release them. Your path is not to dwell in their darkness, but to find the light within your own. You are not defined by who chooses you, nor by who fails to see you. You are defined by the way you choose to meet yourself, by the courage you show in facing your own depths, and by the love you cultivate for every part of your being. Remember, the work of becoming whole is not a destination, but a lifelong process. There will be days when you feel the old patterns whispering, when you are tempted to seek validation outside yourself. But each time you turn inward, each time you remember the flame you carry, you grow stronger. And with that strength comes a freedom that no one can take from you. In the end, the narcissist's ability to sense your wound is only a reflection of something far greater, your capacity to heal, to transform, to rise. Your wound is not a weakness. It is the place where your soul has been waiting for you to come home. Walk toward it, listen to it, and know that in doing so, you are not only healing yourself, you are awakening to the fullness of who you were always meant to be.